Hi everybody. I wanted to say a big thank you to Angela and Ashley and Kathy for asking me to come and speak today. And I think what I'm talking about, bringing the families and the researchers closer together, is a subject dear to my heart. And I would just encourage everybody to work towards doing that, and how I can help possibly to facilitate that. I'm here because I had a child who was successfully treated for leukemia, and I'm very aware that we're fortunate in that, also because of the treatments and protocols and trials that were done in the years preceding that allowed us to have access to a really good protocol and clinical trial. I wonder if you all would indulge me for a minute and stand up. See, I make you work for it. Okay. Now, if your family, well, let's do it this way. Who here has had any involvement with clinical trial paperwork? If you do, stay standing. If you don't, sit down. Okay. And who here has read clinical trials? You're all still standing up. Any of them found them intelligible? If you can understand them, put your hand up. If you had patient information sheets that were understandable, put your hand up in the air. Okay. Okay, well that's good. Well, I know. Right, now can I only have families remaining standing for this bit now? That's great. Now, families who have had any exposure to assent forms or consent forms for clinical trials, stay standing. So we have a few of you still. And any of you who have found that those pieces of paper were actually understandable and comprehensible, put your hands up. Okay. Oh, good. All right, well, I'm hoping and as we go forward, we can improve that for families who are being diagnosed today and tomorrow and next week and things like that. I thought it was very nice that they coordinated their logo with you guys. You see this, the Cavendish Conference Centre. So I'm just going to talk briefly about my engagement role with the NCRI, and just touch on some of parents' concerns about participating in trials, and then lastly talk about PORT, which is the Pediatric Oncology Reference Team. And I think this is an opportunity for families who want to get involved can do very, very easily. So what do I do on I sit on the National Cancer Research Institute Children's Cancer and Leukemia Clinical Study Group. What's that? Well, the NCRI has a bunch of clinical study groups that the research on cancer take place under, and one of them is the Children's Cancer and Leukemia one. That also has subgroups like the leukemia subgroup and various other ones. And what do? We facilitate the communication between the researchers and bringing in the family perspective on this. And one thing we do is assist in the development of patient information sheets. And my definition of this is, obviously, I think most families did not choose to go down this route, but it was chosen for us. But we can bring our non-expert view to the proceedings. So as I say, we review and input into the trial development process, and really trying to get involved in an earlier stage rather than just looking at patient information sheets. It's recommended that lay people are involved, even sitting on trial management committees, and I would strongly encourage that, because I think the earlier the family perspective is included, the better research trials you're going to get from that. Our specific brief is looking at the trial question and how that would affect families and the risk or burden for the child. So examples of this, there was a trial that came forward, and it was some device, and everybody was asking scientific questions, and the lay people were in there saying, well, hang on a minute, can this be done at home? Can this device be put on, and can the people spend most of the time at home? And it's that sort of practicality, those sorts of issues and accountability, and asking those questions of, has this trial opened in all centres? If not, why not? Has this trial been written up? If not, why not? Those sorts of things. So we're not there to review the science of the study, but it's not unheard of for us to have comments about that as well. And so it is these questions about practicality of what they're doing, and also the point out with children's cancer, it's unique. I think I'd also sit on the National Cancer Research Institute, that the conference committee, and that's for all cancers in the UK, and it's basically breast, lung, bowel, bit of prostate, and then way down the line is children's cancer. And when we all get together, the cause dearest to our heart is obviously pediatric oncology, and that is the be-all and end-all. But when you get on the bigger platform, it's not so recognised. So I'm keen to highlight that and say, how can we work together to change that? But in terms of children's cancer, the other thing is it's not just one cancer. So you've got your liquid cancers, the leukemias, lymphomas, the brain cancers, the solid tumors, the bone tumors, the muscle tumors, all of these. And too often, in my view, we get split apart. And it is rare, luckily, but we get so split. And the importance, I think, is for us to come together under one sort of umbrella, to have a louder voice. So on this committee, we represent all of them, and it's this accountability of saying, how come there's not so much research in the bone cancers? Gee, there seems to be a lot of research coming through from this particular disease, and is this good research? As it's not representative, so I'm waving this thing, which I will wave at you later on, as it's just two of us sitting on that committee, two consumers, which is the NCRI word, which is horrible, but anyway, that's theirs. I shouldn't say that. Take that back. It's a nice thing to be able to refer back to a wider group of families who have had a wider group of diseases, and they've had wider experience. Some parents have, their children have survived, some haven't, etc. And here's my bid for new members for Port are very welcome, and I'll have the email address up at the end. Some of the parents' concerns at diagnosis, I'm sure none of this will be a surprise to you, and certainly the two talks that preceded me really resonated with me. But basic questions, and I think when you're told your child has cancer, very often it's common for all of us to kind of think, well, I don't speak English anymore, forget it. The bottom's just fallen out of my world. I'm never going to laugh ever again. That's it. And then you have these big words put into lengthy documents, and questions like, what is randomization? Who would have come across that word before being told that their child or teenager has a poor, a diagnosis of cancer? Not wanting to be the guinea pig, not wanting to have uncertainty. With the current leukemia trial, they're doing really well with that. So who wants to be the person having less treatment in that? If it works, why change it? Really tricky questions like that. The other side is, well, if we go on this trial, will we have access to better drugs? If we stop on the trial, will you be cross with us? How does this change where we need to go to for our treatment, or how often we need to go to treatment? Will there be more injections? All those sorts of practical questions. Usually you'll have signed the consent way before you can ask any of those. So we get to consent. Some people will talk again about the timing of consents and how that can be facilitated. And I know a lot of good work is done in terms of communicating with families and how this kind of thing can be explained in a clear way. Publications are written about clinical trials just to help to facilitate these things. But time and again, this comes up. The patient information sheets could have been better and more accessible. And that's really what Port has been working on, to see if we can improve these papers for those families who are going to be diagnosed, in June this year. And again, it's the timing of thinking about whether to consent at the first discussion. I'm going to come on to that in just a wee minute. But the point here, which you probably will all sympathise with, it's difficult to take it all in. It's really difficult to take it in. I think the wording is very important in terms of families not wanting to be told, you should do this for the benefit of other people. This is a good thing to do. And some people have queried about the death of altruism, that people are not wanting to take part in clinical trials at this point. One thing we found families are generally happy with is this. The treatments that we have now are thanks to other children and families who took part in previous trials, and many of these were pre-consent. It was just done, and this feeling, as Pam spoke about a long time ago in the beginning of the talks, during this trial, we believe this treatment is as good, if not better, than standard treatment, but we don't know, and we won't know until we do the trial. And then finally, it's a strange phenomenon of kids on clinical trials generally doing better. People aren't going off-piste and doing what they think works on a Friday afternoon. You're very, very fixed protocols of what to do, what stopping rules are, SAEs, all of these things are built in, how they're going to titrate your medication. It's very controlled and really reassuring, I think. But this is a tricky question. What happens if we get the arm with the less treatment? As I say, for a disease where the prognosis is good and the treatment works well, what happens if they're randomized into the one that's getting less medication? And it's hard to take a long-term view, I think, when your child's just been diagnosed. You really just want to make sure everything is done, this is what we've heard, to make sure that they're here next year and not really concerned what might happen in 15, 20, 30 years. Having said that, with survivors that we speak to now, and people who've had treatments 30 years ago on some of the same medications as today, you see those long-term side effects of what's going on with heart failure and all sorts. Right. The other question is, how do we get the information back to patients who've taken part in trials? Now it's recommended that something, when people put together their clinical trial, there has to be a way of feeding back to families. One caveat on that is people who might have ticked the box saying, yeah, we want to hear what happened at the end of this trial, for some reason they may not want to know when push comes to shove. So I think we do need to make sure that they're reconsulted and something's not just sent to them. And then this tricky question of, what if their trial didn't receive the treatment that was found to be successful? How do we support that? This is a small number of people at Port up in Manchester. So who are we? We're parents of children who've had cancer. Some of us are bereaved parents and some of us are parents of survivors. We're all volunteers, works free. We're loosely affiliated with Pam Kearns at CRCTU in Bhaskar Saha up in Manchester. What that means is we can consult with them and ask them questions as many times as we like, but we can say what we think, and we're unaffiliated to them. And I think that independence is really important, so that when we go and engage with ethics committees and things, we're speaking as parents, we're not speaking as employees, because we're not employed. Our remit is very clear. It's clinical trial issues. We don't go into parking fees in hospitals or individual patient cases and things like that. We've been going for 3 years, and it's all virtual. We've had 2 meetings, and those are very work-focused. So we review patient information sheets, consent and assent forms, questionnaires. We've devised templates for the patient information sheets, and we've been working with ethics. That's the National Research Ethics Advisory Panel and the Nuffield Bioethics. And what I would say is this is really exciting. It was great to be able to talk to them. An issue that we had was assent forms, which is basically watered-down consent. They're wanting us to give those to under 8s, and we just felt really strongly this is inappropriate in terms of pediatric oncology. These are sick kids. You can't be waving these sorts of things under their noses. And didn't really get great feedback when things were just submitted and it said Port said. So we actually met with the head of NREAP to talk to him, and he said, well, it depends on what happens. We've got a consultation document that the Nuffield are putting out, and we managed to engage with them in time before the document came out. And Faith very kindly went and ferried about 6 tons worth of these. This is the small format from the Nuffield on bioethics. And children's cancer, I'm pleased to say, and they made a special comment of it here on page 5, under special category 1, talking about situations where assent may not be appropriate. And I think this is exactly what we wanted to say, is this is very different from, say, an eczema trial or, a young person with diabetes who can say what they want to do in terms of taking part. So I'd advise you all to have a quick look at that. Why are good patient information sheets important? I think you'll all agree. For day 1 randomizations, that's the case with leukemia. They're horrendous. I don't know how we can possibly say that we're getting informed consent from families when it's on the same day they've just been told their child has cancer and really nothing is going in. And also parents might just say no because they feel uncertain. They're not comfortable to sign. And they might well sign later on once they understood about it better. And maybe there's scope in this, rather than day 1 randomizations, having something so that people could have their consent taken a few weeks down the line for a clinical trial and standardize things up front. This is Danielle's ideas. I don't know if it's possible, but day 1 randomizations, you're never going to make that pretty. However, what makes good patient information sheets? To have it clean, concise, short, taking out everything except for the trial question. So often we would come across them that they had the standard treatment and the trial treatment together, and all the side effects from all the drugs from standard treatment and trial treatment, and everything just gets so heavy, and people think, oh God, we're going to have all of these dreadful things with dreadful side effects, and actually that's standard treatment. They're getting that anyway. So if you can separate and say, this is the trial question, these are the drugs attached to that trial question, these are the side effects to that, great, much shorter. Familiar language. I think if we can get rid of all the techie language and scientific language, and then also recognize what a multicultural country we live in, and if we can get translations for those documents available for families. One other thing I would say is Kathy was asking about getting it all on apps and what have you. I'm not your man for that, but definitely there's scope for that. We always will need the paper copies as well, but yeah, that would be a great way to move forward, and I'd encourage involving our young survivors in that because they're so good at this sort of thing. I think we've now done 30 trials, and they're all coming from CRCTU. There's just a list of a few of them. And here's what we think is a nice, clean layout. So more like a magazine layout where you've got your table of contents in the front. So if you want to ask your doctor or the research nurse a question, you can quickly see where it is, and the contact information very clearly visible as well. And no more than 8 pages, that would be great. So just port, as having that experience of having a child who's had cancer, we know how it feels to be in that position, to be asked to take part in a trial. And so we're really trying to see how we can improve things for people who are coming. And this is what I would say is we need more parents to do this kind of thing. We've got 2 young people who were both, one studying science, one's a medical school, and they both had cancer as kids, which I'm amazed by. And I said to them, you can do this in your own time. You can opt in and out. You can choose. There are all the different age ranges, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, etc., and the under 8s. So if you have any interest in this, or you think you might know somebody who might want to do this, please take down the email address and do contact us. And thank you all for your attention. And hopefully, going forward, we'll have more people still standing with both arms in the air saying, yeah, great, understood everything about the consent and the patient information sheet. So thank you.